There's this moment that happens to almost everyone in their early 30s. You're sitting at your desk, or maybe lying in bed scrolling through your phone, and you do the math. You realize that if you had just started investing, or saving seriously, or learning that skill just 1 year earlier, you'd be in a completely different place right now. And it stings. Because 1 year doesn't sound like much. It's just 12 months. But when you actually run the numbers, when you see what that 1 year could have done, it stops feeling small. It starts feeling like the difference between stress and stability, between catching up and being ahead. So today, I want to show you something that most people don't realize until it's too late: the real cost of waiting. Not waiting 10 years, not waiting until you're 40, just waiting 1 more year. Because the gap that creates, it's bigger than you think. Here's what nobody tells you about starting early. It's not about being disciplined. It's not about having more money or being smarter with it. It's about physics, literally. It's about how time works with money in a way that has nothing to do with how hard you work or how much you earn. Most people think the reason to start early is because you'll have more years to save. And yeah, that's part of it, but that's not the part that matters. The part that matters is something called compounding. And I know you've heard that word before. Everyone talks about it. But I don't think most people actually understand what it does. Because when you hear compound interest, you imagine your money growing a little bit every year, like a straight line going up. But that's not how it works. It's not a straight line. It's a curve. And the curve doesn't really start bending upward until later, which means the early years, the ones you think don't matter much, are actually doing the most important work. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say you're 25 years old. You decide to put away $300 a month. That's it. Not a crazy amount, just $300. You do that every single month until you're 65, 40 years. And let's assume a pretty standard 7% average annual return, which is roughly what the stock market has done historically after inflation. By the time you're 65, you'd have about $750,000. Now, let's say you wait just 1 year. You're 26 when you start. Same $300 a month, same 7% return, same 40-year window, except now it's actually 39 years because you started a year later. How much do you think you'd have? 700,000? 650? Try around 695,000. You lost $55,000 by waiting 1 year. And here's the thing that makes it worse. You didn't save less money. You saved almost the same amount. The difference in what you actually contributed out of your own pocket is only $3,600. That's the 12 months you missed. But the difference in what you end up with is $55,000. That's not your money. That's the compound interest you never got. Because those early contributions had 40 years to grow, and the ones you made a year later only had 39. 1 year. That's the part people don't emotionally understand. They think, okay, I'll start next year. It's fine. I'm young. And next year comes, and something else is happening. A wedding, a trip, a car repair. And it becomes the year after that, and then the year after that. And every single year you wait, you're not just losing that year's contributions, you're losing decades of growth on that money. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad if you didn't start at 25. Most people don't. I didn't. And honestly, most 25-year-olds are just trying to figure out how to afford rent and pay off credit cards. The idea of investing feels like something rich people do, or something future you will handle. But that's exactly the trap. Because waiting feels costless. It feels like nothing. You're not losing anything right now. You're just not starting. And our brains are terrible at valuing future consequences when there's no immediate pain. It's the same reason people don't floss until they have a cavity, or don't stretch until their back hurts. The cost is invisible until it's not. And with money, the cost stays invisible for a really long time. You don't feel it at 26, or 28, or 32. You feel it at 45, when you realize you're 15 years behind where you should be, and you can't just make that up by working harder. Because here's the other thing, you can't out-earn lost time. You can get a better job, you can save more aggressively, you can cut expenses, but you can't go back and give your 25-year-old self those extra years of compounding. That window closes. And I think that's what makes this so frustrating for people when they finally understand it. Because we're told our whole lives that if you work hard enough, you can catch up, you can make up for lost ground. And in a lot of areas, that's true. You can learn a new skill at 40. You can get in shape at 50. But with compounding, time is the ingredient you can't substitute. You can't work twice as hard and get the same result. The math just doesn't allow it. Let me show you what I mean with a different angle. Imagine two people. Person A starts investing at 25 years old. They put in $200 a month for 10 years. Then they stop completely. They never add another dollar, but they leave that money invested until they're 65. Person B waits until they're 35 to start, but then they invest $200 a month for 30 years straight, all the way until 65. They contribute 3 times longer than Person A. Who do you think ends up with more money? Person A, the one who stopped at 35. Person A ends up with around $338,000. Person B ends up with around $244,000, even though Person B contributed way more of their own money, even though they were disciplined for 3 decades. Why? Because Person A's money had an extra 10 years at the beginning to compound, and those early years are worth more than the later ones. That's how the math works. The curve doesn't care about effort, it cares about time. And that's hard to accept, because it means you can do everything right for 20 years and still be behind someone who just started earlier, even if they quit. It feels unfair. But it's not about fairness, it's just how exponential growth works. So what does this actually mean for you? It means the most valuable financial decision you can make isn't finding the perfect investment. It's not timing the market. It's not waiting until you have more money to start with. It's starting now, even if it's small, even if it feels pointless. Because the math doesn't care how much you start with. It cares how long it has to work. Let me give you a different example. Let's say you can only do $50 a month right now. That's it. You're thinking, what's $50 going to do? Maybe that's one less dinner out. Maybe it's canceling a streaming service you barely use. It doesn't feel significant. If you start at 25 and do that for 40 years at 7%, you end up with around $125,000. If you wait until you're 35 because you want to get your finances in order first, and then you start saving $200 a month, which is 4 times as much, you'd end up with around $244,000. So yeah, you'd have more, but look at what you had to do to get there. You had to save 4 times as much per month for 30 years just to make up for waiting 10 years with a smaller amount. The person who started earlier with less still built something meaningful, and they did it with way less stress because they gave time the room to do the work. That's the shift. You stop thinking, I'll start when I have enough. You start thinking, I'll start now because time is the thing I actually can't buy later. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, okay, but I have debt. I have student loans. I have credit cards. Shouldn't I pay those off first before I start investing? And look, that's a fair question. If you have high-interest debt, like credit card debt at 18 or 20%, yeah, you should probably tackle that first, because paying 18% interest is like investing in reverse. You're losing money every month. But if you have lower interest debt, like student loans at 4 or 5% or a car loan, the math gets more interesting. Because if you can earn 7% by investing while only paying 4% on your debt, you're still coming out ahead. And more importantly, you're not losing years of compounding while you wait to be completely debt-free. This is where people get stuck. They think they need to have a perfect financial situation before they can start building wealth. No debt, a fully funded emergency fund, 6 months of expenses saved. And those are great goals, but if you wait until everything is perfect, you might wait forever, because life keeps happening. There's always something. The smarter move is to do both. Pay down your debt aggressively, but also start investing something, even if it's $25 a month, even if it feels too small to count, because that $25 at 26 is going to do more for you than $250 at 36. I also want to talk about what this looks like emotionally, because the hardest part of starting isn't the money. It's the feeling that you're already behind, that everyone else started years ago and you missed the boat. And if you're in your 30s or 40s and you're just now thinking about this seriously, I get it. It feels late. You see people online talking about how they started at 22 and now they're financially independent at 35, and it feels like you're running a race where everyone else got a head start. But the truth is, most people didn't start at 22. The average American doesn't start seriously saving for retirement until their 40s. So if you're starting now, you're not behind most people. You're ahead of them. And even if you are behind where you wish you were, that doesn't change what you need to do next. You still need to start, because the alternative is being even further behind next year and the year after that. The point isn't to shame yourself for not starting earlier. The point is to stop letting another year slip by. So what does this look like in real life? It doesn't mean you have to go open a brokerage account tonight and figure out index funds and tax-advantaged accounts and all of that. You can, but you don't have to. It just means you stop waiting for perfect conditions. If your job offers a 401k, even if you can only do 3% right now, do it, especially if they match, because that match is free money and free time. It's both. If your employer matches 50 cents on the dollar up to 6% of your salary, and you're not contributing at least enough to get the full match, you're leaving money on the table. Not hypothetical future money, actual money that would go into your account today. And I know some people avoid this because the 401k interface is confusing, or because they don't know which funds to pick, or because they're scared of doing it wrong. But here's the thing. Even if you pick a mediocre fund, you're still better off than not starting. You can always adjust later. The goal right now isn't optimization, it's activation. If you don't have access to a 401k, open a Roth IRA. You can start one with almost nothing. Some platforms let you start with as little as $10. And yeah, $10 sounds like nothing, but $10 at 25 is not the same as $10 at 35. One of them has 10 years to grow. A Roth IRA is also one of the most flexible retirement accounts because you can withdraw your contributions anytime without penalty. Not the earnings, just what you put in. So if you're nervous about locking money away, this gives you a safety net. You're still building for the future, but you're not completely cutting yourself off from that money if something happens. And if you're sitting here thinking, I'm already 35, I already missed the window. No, you didn't. Because the best time to start was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. And if you wait another year because you feel behind, you'll just be more behind next year and the year after that. Let's say you're 35 right now. You put away $300 a month. At 7%, by the time you're 65, you'd have around $340,000. If you wait until you're 40, you'd have around $244,000. That's almost $100,000 less for waiting 5 years. 5 years in your 30s and 40s feels like nothing when you're living through it, but in terms of compounding, it's everything. There's also something psychological that happens when you start, even if it's small. You stop feeling helpless. You stop feeling like your financial future is just something that happens to you. You start seeing yourself as someone who's building something. And that shift in identity is more valuable than the money itself in the beginning. Because once you see yourself as someone who invests, you start making other decisions differently. You start thinking of purchases in terms of opportunity cost, not in a restrictive way, but in an aware way. You start asking, is this worth it, or would I rather have that money working for me? And over time, that awareness compounds too, just like the money. Here's the thing about time and money that I think gets lost in all the advice and the guilt and the comparison. You can't control what you didn't know 5 years ago. You can't control what you didn't have 5 years ago. But you can control what you do today. And 1 year from now, you're going to be looking back at today. You're either going to be wishing you had started, or you're going to be grateful that you did. That's it. That's the choice. Not between being rich or poor, not between being ahead or behind, just between starting and waiting. And the truth is, most people wait. They wait because it feels safer, because starting feels like admitting you're not where you want to be, because saving $100 a month feels too small to matter. But small and early beats big and late every single time. I think about this a lot when I hear people say things like, "I'll start investing when I get my next raise," or "I'll start when I pay off my car," or "I'll start when I feel like I have enough." And I get it. There's always a reason to wait. There's always something that feels more urgent. But the problem is that next raise comes and suddenly there's a new expense. The car gets paid off and now the roof needs fixing. You never feel like you have enough because enough keeps moving. The people who actually build wealth aren't the ones who wait for perfect conditions. They're the ones who start in imperfect conditions and let time do the heavy lifting. So if there's one thing you take from this, let it be this: 1 year matters. It matters more than you think. And the year you start doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be this one. Because the power of starting isn't in the amount. It's in the time you give it to grow. And that part is still in your control. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to know the perfect strategy. You just need to start. And then, a year from now, you'll be somewhere you're not today. And 5 years from now, you'll look back and realize that today was the day that mattered. Not because you did something dramatic, but because you stopped waiting.